Welcome back to This Is a Commander channel, where this is a Commander channel, and today I'm going to talk about Commander Tough Rules and Cool Interactions, episode 109. Today's episode is going to take a look at one of my favorite commanders that I built this year, which is one of the legal legendary creatures from Unfinity that we got last year. The card is Magar of the Magic Strings, and he does a pretty weird effect that is what drew me to making a commander deck with him. But his weirdness does lead to some strange situations. And being close to the holidays, I do have a gift for you all, which is a bonus question at the end of the video. So make sure to stay tuned to the very end of the episode to try and solve that bonus question. So what does Magar actually do? Magar has an activated ability for 1, a black, and a red, to note the name of target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard and put it onto the battlefield face down. It's a 3/3 creature with, whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you may create a copy of the card with the noted name. You may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. And if this creature would leave the battlefield, exile it instead of putting it into anywhere else. So there is a whole lot here that I could talk about, like what the copyable values are of the creatures, what zone are the copies created in, how this works with double-faced cards, how do these things interact with Magecraft, and much more that I could talk about. But I wanted this episode to focus on the creation of these creatures and how they interact with a lot of popular Stax pieces that exist in Magic. So now let's get to these Stax cards. Weathered Runestone is an artifact that says non-land permanent cards in graveyards and libraries can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast spells from graveyards or libraries. Grafdigger's Cage is an artifact that says creature cards in graveyards and libraries can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast spells from graveyards or libraries. Soulless Jailer is an artifact creature that says permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast non-creature spells from graveyards or exile. And finally, Kunaros, Hound of Athreos, is a legendary creature that says creature cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. Players can't cast spells from graveyards. So you may have noticed a trend on these effects. Now, for each of these cards, I'm going to focus on that first ability of each of these, those dealing with the permanents and creatures entering the battlefield. So when we look at Magar's ability, you're moving the instant or sorcery card from the zone of the graveyard straight to the zone of the battlefield. And it will never not be a creature while it exists on the battlefield. We can see in Comprehensive Rules 708.3 that objects that are put onto the battlefield face down are turned face down before they enter the battlefield, so the permanence enters the battlefield abilities won't trigger, if triggered, or have any effect, if static. So if these Stax types cards were out, could you use Magar to bring these cards onto the battlefield from the graveyard, or would they shut Magar down? So each of these cards, their wording is pretty specific as to what types of things they stop, whether it just be creatures, whether it's just non-land permanents, or if it's just all permanents. But let's just focus on one of them for now. Let's go with Soulless Jailer. It's one of the newest versions of this effect, and it shuts off most things. It shuts off the most out of these, so let's use it. It specifically says permanent cards in graveyards can't enter the battlefield. So when we use Magar's ability to animate an instant from your graveyard, it is in your graveyard, so that is a check towards this stopping it, but it isn't a permanent, it's an instant. But once it enters the battlefield, once it is on the battlefield, it will be a permanent, it will be a creature. So at what point does this effect try to or fail to stop this Magar ability from resolving? For players that are building Magar, I have some positive news. The Jailer, as well as all the other cards, do look at what the card is while it is in the graveyard before it would enter the battlefield. This isn't like a replacement effect in which these look forward in time as to how things will exist. To give you an example, another example of things that these cards do and don't stop, let's swap over to looking at Grafdigger's Cage. Its first ability would stop you from reanimating a Phyrexian Metamorph, even if you would have it enter the battlefield as a copy of a non-creature artifact, but you could use an effect that brings back a Sculpting Steel from your graveyard straight to the battlefield and even have it enter as a artifact creature that is on the battlefield. Okay, now for your bonus question. So far this episode, I have focused on the first ability on these cards, and yes, technically for Kunaros, it has been his fourth ability, but now I'm going to focus on their second ability, fifth for the dog. You can reread them all again, but generally they stopped players from casting spells or specific kinds of spells from certain zones like the graveyard, the library, and exile. So the bonus question is this: do any of these cards stop you from resolving the abilities on your face-down creatures that Magar animated? Read these very carefully as to the zones they shut down, and then reread Magar's ability very, very carefully. I very much look forward to reading the answers that you all have as to, I think this is a pretty tricky question. Who knows? It may not be. You guys, a lot of these videos, you guys catch on to these things pretty dang quick, and you do solve these bonus questions, but I think that this one's pretty tricky, so hopefully this gives you guys a run for your money. Anyhow, that's all I've got for today's episode. As always, I hope that all of you have found this video to be entertaining at least, and I hope that a few of you have even learned something about the crazy rules in this great game of Magic. I also hope that all of you have some great holidays coming up, whatever you celebrate. This is a fun time of the year, and I'm going to be spending some great time with my family and drink a whole lot of hot chocolate. That's all I got now. So yeah, hope you guys have a good one. Ta-ta.